Good evening. For those who are just coming to sit, if possible, to move to the middle of the rows. That way, for those who are just arriving, we'll still have a seat. So if you see that there's space in the middle of your row, just move there, so people arriving can actually sit somewhere. Good evening. My name is David Bro. I'm a second-year psychology student here at the University of Ottawa, and I'm also a member of a club on campus called Campus for Christ. And I'm going to be your MC for this evening. Thank you very much for coming. This event has actually been made possible because of Campus for Christ and their organization, also in association with the Center for Inquiry and the English Debating Society, who will be the moderating body for tonight. Why would we be putting on an event like this tonight? The goal of this evening is simply to help the University of Ottawa become a place where spiritual discussion is something that happens, and that they can be discussed in a way where people are completely informed. Campus for Christ hopes to meet the spiritual needs of students on campus, and this event will allow students to continue to ask important questions about spiritual aspects. And I have the privilege of introducing our two debaters, Dr. Ronald de Sousa, who will be presenting the atheist side of the debate.
Woo! All right.
Dr. de Sousa earned his BA at New College, Oxford University, and his PhD at Princeton University with his thesis on categories, translation, and linguistic theory. Some of his published work include Why Think, Evolution and the Rational Mind, and The Rationality of Emotion. Dr. de Sousa is now an emeritus professor at the University of Toronto, a position which he has held since 1996. Some of Dr. de Sousa's current research is in the field of the philosophy of emotion and also the philosophy of the mind. We also have Reverend Joe Boot, who will be representing the theist side of this debate. Reverend Boot did his undergraduate studies in theology in Birmingham Christian College in England, and completed his postgraduate studies in missiology with the University of Manchester. Some of the books that he has written include Searching for Truth, Why I Still Believe, and How Then Shall We Answer. Reverend Boot is now a pastor in Toronto at Westminster Chapel, a position that he has gotten recently this year. And he is also the founder of the Ezra Institute for Contemporary Christians. So the way that this debate is going to be held is very simple. Each speaker will be given 20 minutes for an opening remark. Afterwards, each speaker will have 10 minutes for their rebuttal, after which each speaker will have another 5 minutes to respond to that rebuttal. After this, we are going to open the floor to a short 20-minute period of question and answers, in which I will explain the details a little later. We will conclude by having each speaker give their finishing remarks 5 minutes, which they will have 5 minutes to do each. As we begin this evening, I will pass on the reins to Rachel Gendron, President of the English Debating Society, who is doing a joint honors BA in Political Science and Communication in Immersion, who is going to be our moderator for this evening. Thank you, Rachel, for being a part of this evening. I wish you all a very good night. Enjoy.
Thank you, David. This debate will come to order. The question we will be speaking to tonight is, does God exist? Representing the proposition is Reverend Joe Boot. Representing the opposition is Dr. Ronald de Sousa. There will be no heckling and there will be no points of information. Without further ado, I call upon Reverend Joe Boot to speak for the proposition and propose his case in an address not to exceed 20 minutes. Hear, hear.
Well, good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you to the organisers and to the Debate Society and to Ronnie for being my discussion partner this evening. Can't see many of you, but I'm going to do my best to communicate to you in a way that is hopefully effective this evening. The question before us tonight is, does God exist? And the first thing we need to notice about the question is that we're not asking whether we like God or whether we have some autobiographical commentary as to what God has or hasn't done to our liking, but rather whether the proposition of God is necessary to make sense of human experience. Strict atheism, of course, is an impossibility by definition, because it's possible that God may exist somewhere outside of your experience. So unless you're omnipresent everywhere in the universe all at the same time, you cannot possibly know for certain that God does not exist unless you were in fact God. So only God could know that there is not a God. Now, Karl Popper, the noted philosopher of science in the 20th century, said, "We never know what we are talking about." Now, I hope that we can do a little bit more than that tonight. That was a popular phrase that was oft repeated, but I think that it's true that we can never know really what we are talking about unless God exists. Let me begin by being completely upfront and honest. I'm a Christian. I don't pretend tonight to be coming to this debate as a neutral individual, because I don't think there's any such thing as neutrality in reasoning. We all have pre-commitments and assumptions about reality, about life, by which we seek to understand the world of our experience. So the skeptic Alfred North Whitehead suggested that religion is what an individual does with his solitariness. Paul Tillich said religion is a state of being grasped by an ultimate concern. Even the Humanist Manifesto 2 defines humanism as a religion. We all have basic assumptions about reality. Sociologists have sought to define religion in a similar way. Milton Yinger says religion can be defined as a system of beliefs and practices by means of which a group of people struggle with the ultimate problems of life. That includes myself and Ronald de Sousa tonight. This is not a debate about religion versus science or irrationality versus rationality. This is about two worldviews, which is another term for religious assumption, really. If you don't like the term religion, let's substitute it for worldview. Two worldviews that hold something different about reality. I think we're all essentially religious creatures. Not only that, I think we all have a divinity concept. All of us believe that there is something that is non-dependent or independent. Now, for you, that might be matter or energy, or the vacuum, or it might be God. But we all have a concept of non-dependent or independent reality that's not conditioned by something else. That then becomes our conception of God. Some people today hold that the vacuum, which is a sea of fluctuating energy, is non-dependent reality. It just is. The beginning of all things. That's a religious assumption. So there's no proposition without presupposition. Now then there becomes a problem. I can't prove to you my most basic assumptions directly. Because if I could, they wouldn't be my most basic assumption, would they? What I established that assumption with would be my most basic assumption. So we all have to start somewhere. I think Dr. de Sousa tonight will probably start with the finite self, himself, his autonomous reason. I begin the discussion with belief in the being of God. You can't prove many things directly. You can't prove there are other minds, or that there really is a material universe, or that your memory is reliable. Those are all assumptions, they're all beliefs that we have to hold in order to make life make sense. The pagan assumption about reality, the pantheistic assumption and the theistic assumption stand in opposition to one another. The pagan assumption is that somehow matter and energy are eternal. Paul Davies, the researcher and scientist, has said, science has its own faith-based belief system. All science proceeds on the assumption that nature is ordered in a rational and intelligible way. You couldn't be a scientist if you thought the universe was a meaningless jumble of odds and ends, haphazardly juxtaposed. Now, what is the kind of evidence that's relevant to our discussion tonight? Well, we don't use the same kind of evidence to answer every type of question, do we? I mean, if you want to know, if my kids want to know whether there's cookies in the jar, they go into the kitchen, they stand on a chair, they get the cookie jar, they have a look and see if there's any cookies. Some of the new atheists like Richard Dawkins have said believing in God's like pink elephants and orbiting teapots. Well, I think the question of God is a wholly different type of question.